It's important to note that plants evolved from algal ancestors that lived in the sea. And clearly, if you live in water, then apart from needing no support, your nutrients, particularly in this context, carbon dioxide, will diffuse to you through the water. And you will not need to worry about drying out because you're living in water. So you get your nutrients diffusing to you, and you don't have to worry about drying out. At some point in their evolutionary history, plants began to colonize the land. And of course, the land wasn't like it is now. There was no soil. It was a harsh environment. It was also comparatively and actually very dry. The atmosphere would be dry, and so plants faced a new challenge that they hadn't faced before. In that dry environment, they would lose all their water and die unless they had a strategy to deal with that. The strategy to deal with that all plants have these days is a cuticle, often waxy, and here we can see a cuticle being peeled off a plant, and here on the right we can see a cuticle, in this case on a cabbage, with waxes and such like that makes it waterproof, and the main function of that is not necessarily to prevent water going in, as it would if we were wearing a raincoat, but is in fact to prevent the water leaving the leaf and the leaf wilting. And that's a good solution. You can prevent the water leaving the leaf, and that's not a problem. Of course, you now have created a problem, because while you're not going to dry out, the problem is that you can't now eat. You can't now take the carbon dioxide in. So what solutions have plants come up with to be able to take in the carbon dioxide, but also to restrict the loss of water? Well, if we look at an early plant, a primitive plant, such as mosses and bryophytes, and this is a liverwort that you can see here. On the left, you can see it living near a stream, and that's because it still needs to live in quite damp places. These are bryophytes in the foreground here, liverworts that are living close to that water. If you look at them closely, either under a low-power microscope or a magnifying glass, you'll see that they have pores in the leaf. So they have a cuticle, but they have pores in the leaf. And so this is the first solution to how do you not dry out, having a cuticle, but also how do you get in the CO2? So you put a hole in the cuticle to allow the CO2 to diffuse in. So this is what these primitive plants have done. It's a simple solution, and here's a cross-section through one of those pores. This dark tissue here is the photosynthetic material, which needs the CO2, and this is the pore here. And sure enough, the CO2 can diffuse in through that pore and reach the photosynthetic material. But you may also immediately have seen a problem that if the CO2 can get in, the water can also get out. So while it's a partial solution to the problem of taking in CO2 but not losing too much water, a simple static pore isn't the full solution, and that's why the bryophyte still has to live near water in relatively damp places. Flowering plants, angiosperms, but also the gymnosperms, conifers and so on, have actually gone one stage further, and they still have the pores in the leaves, but these are much more sophisticated. So here is what we call a stomate or a stomata, and here's the pore through which the CO2 can diffuse in. But instead of just being a static pore, this pore can open and close in order to take in CO2 when it's a better time to do that, and to minimize water loss, for instance, in dry times. The mechanism by which this happens is there's these two sausage-shaped cells which form the pore, and the inner side of the pore, the cell walls of those cells are thicker. And so when they take in water by osmosis and their turgor pressure rises, they increase in pressure, they swell asymmetrically, allowing that pore to form. And of course, if water leaves, the cell wall here will pull that pore shut. So here we have a partially better solution than the liverwort, which just had a static pore. Here we have two stomates. This one here you can see is open, and this one is closed. So for the open stomate, we can take in CO2. We still, however, lose water. But at times when it's not appropriate to take in CO2, or we might be losing too much water, for example at night when there's no light to generate the energy, so there's no point in losing water without being able to make CO2, your stomata can close. So while it's not a total solution, it does mean you can regulate the balance between the uptake of CO2 and the loss of water. So, taking in CO2 through your open stomate, and assuming photosynthesis is functioning properly, as we've seen before, we make sugar. We make sugar which can then be processed into all the metabolites that a plant needs. And here we can see a tree, and each year, if it has a good year, it'll take in more sugar, do more photosynthesis, and lay down more biomass. So we can see that if you're able to photosynthesize more, you can fix more carbon dioxide and accumulate more material.